Hey everyone, welcome back to Aurelia City in City Skylines. We started building the cargo harbor project in the last episode. It's mostly done, although it should have the edges a bit polished, so today we will do just that. We will also build some more industry and deal with the tram line running through the area. But most importantly, we will start building a futuristic looking experimental solar power plant. So let's go. And I'm going to start by placing those power plant buildings, but only to just see if it actually fits into this area and to just give myself a better idea how I need to build around it. But later we are going to return to it and properly, detail it and just put trees around it and all those kinds of things. So as you can see, I am using these really nice looking solar tower buildings, and it's kind of obvious that they need to be placed in like bigger numbers, right? You don't really want to build just one, and it's probably a good idea to maybe build them in some sort of a line with a proper spacing. So that's exactly what I'm doing in here. I painted or just built this road really to just give myself a straight line, and then I'm just experimenting with different spacing. I finally decided to use this and just copy paste it and then delete every single or every other power plant building, right? So I'm just going to have these gaps in between them. Oh yeah, I almost forgot. This is going to be actually a very, very critical element in this entire area, and that's going to be this canal. Now, this canal is not super strictly needed for, good like river traffic in this entire area, but it's going to definitely help for the boats that are going on this big river pretty much through the rest of the city. And if they want to turn towards the cargo harbor, they would need to make like a very sharp turn at the end of this peninsula, let's say, and just return to the harbor that way. But this canal is just going to make it that much easier, and to be perfectly honest, it's just really something to fill the place with, and also to kind of divide the area, which is going to be important later, because I'm going to divide I'm just going to use the canal to form a line between the industry, the actual industry, and some kind of projects that I'm going to do later, okay? So that's the canal. Again, the canal, I just roughly placed it in there because, yeah, like I said, it's going to be the border. So basically today we are going to build all the way up to the canal and with all kinds of detailing and everything. So I'm just really giving myself the space to build in for today, right? Now, this is something I've been doing on the live stream, and I actually cut a lot of, maybe even hours of this time lapse, because I was experimenting heavily with the buildings to place in this area. I was also kind of considering maybe extending those canals from the harbor into this area, maybe to provide some kind of a, I don't know, like a parking space really for the tugs or something like that. I'm not exactly sure, but eventually I decided not to. It would have been kind of a bit too weird, and we don't really have that much space in here for that kind of project. And I just really wanted to fill this place with more industry, so that's exactly what we're doing. I really wanted to, though, continue with some elements that I already did, and in particular that, well, in real life, it's like what is that? Like a railway building? I'm not exactly sure. Like railway maintenance building. The dome, right? The very futuristic looking kind of a golf ball dome building. And if you remember a couple of episodes back, I placed it slightly sunken, did some really sunken areas right next to it with like pipes and all that industrial detailing, and I thought that it's just something I really want to use somewhere else as well. And this place is pretty much the opposite end of the entire industrial area, so doing these kinds of domes on the ends of the industrial zone, why not do that? It might serve as some kind of a, I don't know, I think last time when I built it, I said it might be some kind of like a reactor for some experiments or whatever in the industrial zone, or some kind of manufacturing place, or just like a storage for some gas or whatever, something like that, right? It doesn't really matter in Aurelia, of course. All that matters is it's just going to look good in there. So this was just a very quick process of finally deciding what these buildings, or where I'm going to place them, doing some infrastructure, and then later I'm just going to do some finishing touches there. So I used these kinds of the Miyagi Motors buildings because they are really, really nice. We have some terrain differences in here to play with as well. So for example, the Miyagi buildings are actually very, very high, and on the opposite ends of them, I decided to put those distribution centers, I think. And this was actually the time when we already had, or maybe I didn't have it at this particular project, but I already changed the spawn points of some of these buildings. So for example, the Miyagi Motors buildings, I think I was actually showing these particular ones in the tutorial video for that mod. And I was saying that I don't really exactly like the resupply vehicles to come to the front door, because that's kind of intended only for the workers to enter the factory, right? So I made those entrances for the resupply actually on the backs of the buildings, where I did put those distribution centers, which have those nicely modeled like bays for trucks. So that's a very nice thing to finally be able to do. Now this place right there, the triangle where I put that industrial statue, that's actually going to be pretty much the main entrance into this industrial area. Even for like cars or like pedestrians, workers, there's later going to be a train station that direction. So I decided to just put that statue there, to kind of symbolize that it is the entrance or like the start of the entire area. Now, the next thing that I did was just to really detail the place. So I especially took care to detail this pit right in front of the golf ball, right? So I used heavily some procedural object versions of all kinds of buildings, warehouses and everything. I actually borrowed some of the elements from that previous area, like I talked about. For example, that building with the triangle roof. And then I just filled the pit with all kinds of different details. So for example, these tanks, buildings, then I put some like smokestacks around. I don't think I did smoke for some reason. I don't have it anymore in Aurelia. I'm not really sure where it went, but it might have probably been better to put it there. And this almost traditional kind of detailing detail that's going to be the surface, the asphalt surface with the decals, with these kind of like stained decals, which is going to make the surface on the bottom dark, yet kind of dirty looking. The decals are really going to stand out on the black surface. And then pipes, all these kinds of pipes. This was actually super satisfying to build, because these kinds of, I'm not really sure how to call them, like industrial pits. It's going to give you that idea that, yeah, on the surface you have these buildings, warehouses and factory floors and whatever. That's okay. But these kinds of openings, let's call them, they're probably going to make you think that there's a lot more to it, right? There's obviously some kind of floors below what you see. And that's kind of clear because this place is vertical, obviously a lot. We have this cargo harbor area. We have these canals that are going into the underground kind of. So it might actually continue into the industrial zone. There might be even some more like unloading facilities to unload cargo from the barges directly into the factory floors, into the factory lines. So these kinds of openings with the pipes and everything, it's definitely telling you that there are more floors, below the surface, and actually not just one, but multiple levels. And the entire place is probably much bigger than what you see on the surface. So that's something I really, really like doing. I'm actually going to do one more as we're going to progress with today's project. So that place, kind of parallel to the docks, that was almost done. I just really filled it with some buildings, and that was mostly it. And the most important part, or most interesting part there, was the golf ball and the opening in front of it. But now we need to go to the edge of the harbor in here, basically between the harbor and the newly built canal, and fill that with something. Now, this road that I'm building right here is super important, because this road is actually connecting the different levels of the harbor and the industrial zone. It's not going to look like it, but I am going to make all these rows that I'm preparing here in just a few seconds. Okay, not just yet. I'm going to build the gates first, but these kinds of rows that I prepared there with Move It, I'm just going to make them go into these gates that I'm putting at the fronts of these buildings. And they are going to be functional. A lot of vehicles are going to use them. So basically, through the entire line of structures, on the cargo harbor, I am running a road. I'm not really converting a lot of these buildings into procedural objects that much, so they will be functional. They will have to get some resupplying, so that's all these roads for, right? And there is also, like I said, a road running directly through the entire cargo harbor underground, let's say, or inside the buildings, really invisible to us. And later it's going to connect to that slightly normal looking part of the harbor, where in the last episode, if you remember, I built that outside connection, like the fake outside connection, let's say, the one that has the arrows that I just copy pasted from the edge of the map. So that's going to be super important because this road is also going to serve as the entrance from that spawn point. Is going to serve as an entrance into the rest of the city. So this road is going to see a lot of traffic. I'm not exactly sure if it's going to be in the cinematics for today's episode, but as I progressed further with building this in general area, I definitely had to even deal with some traffic issues. I was actually thinking, now that I remembered, that I might actually put that in the next episode of Aurelia. We're gonna fix some traffic right next time, because that was actually very needed, like I said, and it was kind of satisfying to set up some custom traffic lights, once again. So that's been nice, and seeing just how the traffic works in this place, it's great. Now, this is just me doing some details that I just, very, very quickly thought of on the stream, and I really decided to just do them in here. So right there, I was already preparing this second pit area. It's much smaller. It's just going to be for some pipes. Now, these pipes obviously need to run somewhere. We have this canal, and it makes sense that some of the pipes, some of the resources get transferred over the canal. So we have this tram bridge already in here. It has to be there because of the line that's going to later go all the way to the airport, actually. And why not just put some kind of pipes on the side of it? It's obviously going to be, or if this was real life, it would be kind of connected to the structure of the bridge conveniently, so that there would be only like one structure, for the trams, pipes, and later I'm going to build a parallel road as well. So for this particular project, I'm using, I think this is the wastewater station, the vanilla wastewater station. So I just converted it into procedural objects for the main building, and then I converted it, or just extracted really, just the horizontal pipe and even the knees, right, on the side of this wall. So just to make it more interesting. And then I'm also using the pipes for this pumping station, the vanilla pumping stations. I actually use those exactly the same technique for the dam, for the big one on the big river some time ago. So I already pretty much knew what I was doing with this approach. Now, all these kinds of different pipes in this area, we obviously need to do them here because that's just going to make it look much, much better. And this is later going to be really sunken because on the other side of this tram road, I'm going to fill that with just grass. So these pipes are really just going underground absolutely everywhere. Now, we also have some sort of a pit in front of these futuristic buildings in here. It's kind of a weird shape, so it's not exactly that easy to fill that. Now that I'm thinking of it, I probably could have done another one of those pipe openings, and that might have actually been better now that I look at this place in the time-lapse, in the video editing. But I decided to just fill it with warehouses and even extend some of the pipes under the road and make it go into those buildings. So maybe these pipes are actually connected all the way to the tanks at the start of the harbor area, right? So maybe all the barges that are unloading the tanks, then maybe, these kinds of tanks, then maybe that's going to convert it or just going to run it through those pipes and into the factory floors. But, who knows? Maybe not. Doesn't really matter, it's all up to our imagination. Now, this last area that remained to be filled, I just decided to use exactly the same thing as before. So these more of these tanks and more of these procedural objects buildings that I used before, because I thought that it's not really going to stand out that much if I'm just going to figure out something different for that area, maybe some kind of different buildings like towers, control towers, something like that, because first of all, we already did that, and second of all, I just really wanted to get that done because this place just needed to be filled, really, not really needed to do anything super special in there, even though I think that I am going to eventually put that like a power station building, the quad power station building, or maybe it's not quad, I'm not actually sure, but yeah, this one looking very, very good there. So eventually something is going to stand out there. So this project, this little corner, completes the cargo harbor area. And now we are going to just focus more on doing some details more details inside the industry on top of the harbor, right? So putting all kinds of like containers or parked trailers for the trucks and all those kinds of things, really. Now, this part that I'm doing, this building, it made me think that I want to maybe provide like a functioning cargo station for the trains. A lot of people asked me if it's possible to use the technique that I showed you in that custom station tutorial, even for cargo stations. And I had never used that before, so I have no idea. But the cargo stations are available from the railway connection, so I suppose it might be possible, but I haven't tried that, so I can't really say. And I thought of doing that in here, but then it would be kind of weird because the station would be super short, and the trains, if they would go there, they would kind of just disappear. So that would not look all that great in the harbor. So later I'm going to build a different cargo station on this track, that on the cargo station or the cargo line track, and just to have some vehicles moving on it, right? So hopefully that's going to bring some traffic on the rails through the harbor, which is not really going to end up in the harbor, right? It's just going to go through it. Now, anyway, like I said, we are going to do some detailing in the industrial area, especially around the tram tracks. I'm not exactly sure if this line is a candidate for the first person ride. I already picked a different one for the first one, and we will see, we will see if it's going to catch on. Then maybe I'm even going to this one. So that's why I'm already doing this more extensive detailing, let's say, because all of this is obviously going to be visible from like close up, right, from the tram. So I paid a bit more attention. I even did some kind of detailing on the intersections so that it's just going to be very nice looking. Lots of green around the tracks as well. Now also we need to do something about this bridge over the canal. We obviously cannot do like a standard looking bridge from some like pillars below it because, well, there's the canal, and we obviously cannot obstruct it too much. Now this railway is at a perfect height that I picked when I was building the harbor. I mean perfect so that the barges are going to nicely fit under it, but any kind of bridge structure for a long bridge like this one would obviously make it a bit difficult. So I decided to build a completely custom bridge. I don't think that's something I did in Aurelia before, because I was always using like some kind of network bridges or like building versions of already existing structures downloaded from the workshop. So this is actually quite a historical moment, I should say, because I am building it completely from scratch. Even though these networks, to be completely fair, are intended to be used for building bridges. These particular networks, I think I already used long time ago on that construction site, if you remember. These are super useful, and they are especially useful today because we already have the Rotterdam mod, the one that gets rid of the shadows. And these networks were kind of plagued by the shadows, but not anymore, of course. So that's amazing. I finally decided to do this kind of design. I haven't really done any calculations if it would, stand in real life, but it's looking nice. So, no complaints on the stream, at least from the viewers. So that was nice. That was just a nice detail. I think I actually did a shot in the cinematics of it later, so that's going to be really good to look at, and especially with the 2 episodes in the future when I'm going to do the other side of the canal. Then I'm probably going to record more cinematics of that particular corner with this bridge, because it's just looking good. It fits the area quite well. Now we are going to turn our attention to the power plants once more. So these kinds of buildings, they are big, and you can kind of tell that they are intended to be rotating, right? So I converted them into procedural objects, and you probably already know where this is going, because procedural objects already have the features for animations, right? There is that module for example, turning the buildings. So that's exactly what we need. So I had to convert them, like I said, into PO, which made it slightly more difficult because the buildings go underground slightly. So I had to use some terraforming networks to provide the pit below them and do some kind of detailing around them. So mostly just trees and like a road that's going to form an outline around the towers. And later I played with the animations. I finally decided to not show it in the time lapse too much because it was a lot of trial and error, to get the rotation just right so that I can pair it with the sun rotation as well, or Earth's rotation, of course. And it was not really easy, because obviously the motion is only possible to do linearly, so or like constantly, so the constant motion, constant RPM basically. But obviously the shadows are going to move a lot faster when the sun is at noon, right? Yeah. Or am I? No, maybe I'm mixing it up. I'm not exactly sure. But basically, the shadows movement is not linear, so it was a bit difficult to get that right. But I think it's looking okay. The movement, any movement is probably better than none. Anyway, these kinds of detailed shots of these finished areas with the openings for the pipes and everything. Oh yeah, and the bridge. I also added the lights, the blinking lights on the bridges to kind of symbolize, the clearance or something like that. Even though the barges are obviously all the same height, so that's really nice. It's kind of a shame that I can't make the barges actually move through the area, because it would look much better, obviously, especially with the water running through the canal. It's kind of strange that they are standing in one place, but I didn't really want to disturb the water sources to make the water not flow through the canal, because that would just disturb all kinds of detailing throughout the rest of the city, really. I would either have to lower water in the river, which would make it just weird because it would expose some areas, or raise it in this lake, which would obviously just not work, because the bottom surface of the harbor is pretty much directly at water level. So unfortunately we can't do that. Look at this view, this line of the power plants. I really like them. And yep, this is it. Look at that. We are going to see the towers moving, obviously, so that they catch the most sun. I know that this design of the power plants is probably not the most efficient, because they are like vertical, but it's just cool looking, I just like the way they look. So that's all that matters to me, and that's why I chose to build them in Aurelia. Anyway, guys, that's going to be all for today's episode. Thank you for watching it. Big thanks to all the channel supporters who decided to become the channel members. And yeah, that's all. Thank you for watching. Take care, and I'll see you in the next episode.